note cards, but I didn't want to forget anything, so bear with me. Okay, can you see me?
Yes.
Yeah, enough? Okay. You don't really need to see me, I'm not important. Well, it's really exciting to see all of you here this morning. A lot of smiling faces. This is a good way to start the day. Thanks for that. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Dave's. Now, I couldn't see you when he was asking about Dave's Killer Bread, so you have to do this again. How many of you have heard of or tried Dave's Killer Bread? Okay, we have some distribution issues to work on, clearly. But let me tell you a little bit about the brand first. So, Dave's Killer Bread is the #1 selling sliced organic bread across the country, and we're distributed all across Canada. That's pretty cool. We're organic, we're vegan, we're kosher, we're non-GMO project certified, and on top of all of that, it tastes good. That's a win. When you're trying to eat that healthy, usually it tastes like cardboard, doesn't it? So I came to the company after already being what we call a breadhead. I already liked the bread, and I just wanted a good job. That was over 7.5 years ago. I came to the company to start their cafe for their employee partners. I ran the retail store, and then I started all of their corporate responsibility efforts. It was just a fun job. I liked it. It was a fun gig. I figured I'd be there about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years. Well, it's been more like a lifetime. So that was back in 2010. And during this time, I met one of my colleagues who started a couple months before me, and his name was Ronnie. Now, about 35 years ago, Ronnie had started his family. He did a really short stint in the military, and he kind of was just struggling to make ends meet. And he made a few really dumb decisions and did a short period in prison. He got out. He did what everybody else does. He worked multiple jobs. He tried to connect all the dots, reconnect with his family and his daughters, and it just wasn't working out. So within a few years, he found himself back in prison because he decided to try a new skill called distribution. Well, we didn't hire him for distribution because it didn't work out. So he ended up spending 15 years in a Texas state prison doing hard time. We're going to put a pin in Ronnie's story. We're going to come back to him. Ronnie's story, though I think he's a very incredible, special gentleman, are not special. Over 75% of the people currently in prisons and jails, they will recidivate, which means go back to jail, go back to prison within 5 years of re-entering our community. That's not entirely their fault. Because we built a system that allows them to not find employment, to definitely not find housing, and to not get usual general services, things like SNAP benefits, things that are required that we would all need in order to succeed. What would you do without a job and without the ability to get a house? You probably have to get pretty creative pretty fast. So, we realized that not only Dave of Dave's Killer Bread, who's a real person I should mention, I should have also told you that Dave's Killer Bread means awesome, nobody dies. That's a fun part that I forgot. 1/3 of our workforce has the same story. So at the time, we had over 300 partners. So that was 100 people on our team that had this shared experience that a bunch of us didn't understand because we hadn't directly been impacted by it. So we're going to fast forward to 2013. This was a family-run business up until then. And I got my first non-family member boss. He was our new CEO. To this day, best boss I've ever had. He saw something in me that I didn't know was there, and he said, okay, we have these great team members. They clearly have this shared experience that we don't understand. I'm going to give you a task. You go figure out and understand the cycle of incarceration and re-entry. What? Okay, but that's not where it's going to end. I actually want you to decide what we should do as a company in this area. What? Yes, sir, absolutely, no problem. Yeah, I'll get right on that. So, I did what any rational person would do. I devoted pretty much all of my spare time to reading as many articles, attending as many meetings, conference calls, government convenings as I possibly could. And I kept noticing this one thing that happened, or I should say didn't happen, in all of them. And that was in every single call, and every single meeting, and every single meeting of the re-entry minds, they said employment is the #1 indicator of success for somebody re-entering the community. Well, that makes sense. Yet not a single employer sat in any of these meetings and any of these convenings and championed this work and said, I do it, it works, you should do it too. So I had a little light bulb moment. I said, well, we do it. We see it work every single day. So why don't we talk about it? Why don't we encourage other employers to join this work? Because it is so important. And it doesn't make us any less. What I should have mentioned is when I started at Dave's Killer Bread, we were distributed in 4 states. We had a team of about 125 people. Within 3 to 4 years, we were in 36 states. Our team had increased to 300 people. We were seeing 40% increase year over year in what we had to produce. We were growing by leaps and bounds. Every single person that worked at the company had to pull on a couple more hats. At one point, the janitorial department reported to me. That was a fun learning experience. I don't do that anymore, thankfully. Much better people do. So we realized this is something that actually has been a fabric and woven into what we do, and we're not slowing down. So this isn't hurting us. This hasn't been tricky. This hasn't been scary. This hasn't been hard, quite honestly. So why aren't more people doing it? So during this time, I got to know Ronnie a little bit better, because that was part of what I needed to do. I needed to understand and meet as many people as I could with this experience. So at this point, he had spent that 15 years in a Texas prison. And what I learned is during that time, he had read a magazine article that happened to mention Dave's Killer Bread and how Dave was also a former felon. And he had nonchalantly told his cellmate, he said, hey, maybe I'll go work for them. Clearly they hired. Threw the magazine aside, never thought of it again. Until a few months later, he was released. He was transferred back to Portland, Oregon, which is where I'm based, and was put into a halfway house. Lo and behold, one of his housemates worked at Dave's Killer Bread. Within 2 weeks, he had been hired at Dave's and was starting at the very, very bottom of the totem pole. Now, that was our ovens department at the time. So we didn't have these cute little conventional ovens like in your house where you put in, one loaf of bread and we're done. We're talking banks and banks of massive ovens that you could stand inside of. Actually, a couple of us could probably stand inside one of them. We had about 16 of those, so you're hauling massive racks of bread. They're hot and they're heavy. This is not an easy job. Most of that team was probably 20 to 25 years old. Ronnie was 50. There were a bunch of bets going to see how long this old man was gonna last. People had about 2 days to about, 2 weeks. By week 3, Ronnie came to work every single day, on time, with a good attitude, and he did not complain about that tough job. They realized we should probably train him the whole job. He's not going anywhere. So, needless to say, they trained Ronnie and he continued to just work at Dave's, move through departments as those opportunities arose. As I met more and more of our team, as I did visits at prisons, as I learned more and more about this space, something else struck out to me personally. And that was, there's a lot of commonalities in these stories. And a lot of them I shared. And I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't really prepared to face some of my own kind of childhood demons through this process. What I learned is many of these folks experienced what I had experienced. Either absentee fathers or father figures that came in and out of your life inconsistently. Witnessing and seeing substance abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, and quite honestly, at a very minimum, just inconsistency and uncertainty in the household. All of these things I saw, and almost every single person I've seen and met with experienced at least one of those, if not all of them. And I started scratching my head and realizing if I'd made just a couple of different decisions in my youth, which were very possible, I'd be facing the exact same life. I would be struggling to find employment, to find a home, to provide for myself and what I now have, which are 2 small children, and I don't know if I could have done that. I'm pretty certain I would have had to come up with more creative ways to make a paycheck. Because even without all of that baggage, no one can live on a minimum wage job. And those tend to be the ones that accept people the most. They also have the highest turnover, the worst working conditions, the least amount of benefits. How in the world are you supposed to succeed in any of these circumstances? So with all that being said, I had to decide what we were going to do as a company. So in 2015, we launched the Dave's Killer Bread Foundation. I got to hire one additional person, so we're a mighty team of 2. And our goal was to expand employment opportunities for people with criminal backgrounds. Easy enough, right? I'd love to tell you my job's all done. But I wouldn't be here if that was the case. So we do this by working directly with businesses, of dispelling the common myths. And first and foremost, I have to challenge your individual perception of somebody who commits a crime first. It's not an easy feat, and I don't anticipate to do that today in the 20 to 30 minutes that I'm going to talk at you. But not only do we have to work on that, so our just personal perceptions, then after that, we have to challenge your professional perceptions, because those are different. And then we have to tell you that this isn't scary and this isn't hard, and you have to